Well, thank you for joining me today. It's our first weekly presentation of the new year. Hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas break and a wonderful new year. We're going to get right into this week's question. I'm sure some of you can already guess what it is. If you have questions, Service to O'Hare Wealth, or you can text this number for future installments. How is the current situation in Venezuela impacting the market? Well, why are people asking this? Well, as the date of this video, earlier this weekend, Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, was taken into custody, however you want to phrase it, and taken to New York City to face charges stemming back from 2015. How does that affect the market? Now, I want to be very clear. I'm specifically going to talk about the policy that was implemented, not the politics of why it happened, why it maybe should or shouldn't have happened, or anything surrounding it. It's how does this affect the market going forward? And the short answer is we've seen the market open for a couple of days as a result. The market seems to have shrugged the entire thing off. That does not mean that there aren't real consequences on the ground, but from a market standpoint, it seems like a relatively minimal, if not negligible, disruption. And why might that be? I mean, if you didn't know, Saudi Arabia we think of as having a lot of oil. Venezuela probably has more proven oil reserves than Saudi Arabia does. They are extremely resource rich. They have an embarrassment of riches. They have a lot of metals there as well. They functionally have wealth under the ground that is almost unsurpassable. But they're not very good at utilizing it. So I'm going to increase the size of this chart for just a moment. This is a chart of Iran versus Venezuela. As many of you know, Iran doesn't sell a lot of its oil to Western nations, but it's still responsible for almost 5% of global production per day. Venezuela, on the other hand, for the last 5 years or so, has been under 1%. It really started dropping off in 2015 and has never really recovered. And that's part of the reason the market doesn't seem to think this is much of a big deal. When you attack Iran or bomb them, or they threaten to cut off oil supplies, they control 5% of the global supply. And they can upset things around the Strait of Hormuz, which is another 20 to 25% of global daily supply. That's a big chunk. Venezuela, on the other hand, is if all the oil they produce disappeared tomorrow, it would be a 1% total reduction in supply. I mean, 1% is still a lot, but it's not nearly as impactful as 5 or possibly 20 and 25 from outside sources. The amount of oil production Venezuela can interrupt or transportation interrupt outside of its border is relatively minimal to maybe zero. So that's part of the reason the market's not overly concerned. The second question is, what does this mean long term? Well, there might be a little bit more of a build out in Venezuela to update some of their infrastructure and fix some of the problems they've not really maintained since 2015, which is why their oil supply has dropped. But even when they do that, what is that going to do to oil prices? Well, interestingly enough, and this is a little bit of a history, but in the late 1990s, early 2000s, there was a lot of talk about peak oil, and people were afraid of running out of oil. We did not have the shale revolution yet. And later on in that decade, in the middle of the great financial crisis, oil was going to be threatening to push $150 a barrel. And the United States and many oil producers spent a lot of time building oil refineries that specialize in processing what we call heavy sour crude. If you didn't know, heavy sour crude really means just very thick and heavy amounts of sulfur. It's very common from where it's produced. Saudi Arabia produces heavy sour. Venezuela produces heavy sour. The shale revolution in West Texas, which is why they call it West Texas light sweet crude, is relatively low in sulfur content and relatively thin. So light sweet crude is easier to process. Actually, it gets processed mostly into gasoline, whereas heavy and sour gets processed a lot more often into diesel. Well, one of the things that is also interesting about this is right now there's a lot of oil refineries that are set up for heavy sour that don't have enough heavy sour to process. So they pay a premium to actually process light sweet, which is not good for their margins. They'd rather process the stuff they're set up and designed to process. Well, if a lot of this Venezuelan oil comes back online, there's arguably an excess refinery capacity to process it if need be. So what does this mean long term for oil prices? it means there's yet another oil sort of data point that would point to the fact that oil prices are going to have a difficult time rising to extreme levels. As this comes more and more on board, the U.S. refinery system can probably absorb a lot of it and continue to process it. So the shale revolution has been phenomenal. Yes, the United States is the largest single nation for oil production. We produce more barrels of oil per day than Saudi Arabia does. That is true. But we do still have excess refining capacity. So why do we bring this in? It's the type of oil that we're bringing in. The United States doesn't need to do it, but we are net energy exporters now. We actually send a lot of liquid natural gas overseas. We've shifted a lot away from coal and much more heavy to natural gas and oil. So what does the market think of this overall? There's not really anything here, but maybe a possible tailwind. And that seems to be the reaction from the market overall, is that this is not a major disruption to oil supplies. And for the most part, this could long-term possibly be better, put the United States in a better position than it would if there was relationships and Venezuela selling their oil to other foreign nations. So with that, I'm going to conclude this book, the latest book, Easy Money. Go ahead and review it here. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out and contact us. Hopefully everybody has a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thanks.